Okay, so today we are starting our, well, not really starting, but doing our only notes that we're going to take over the Econ unit. And we're going to be looking at the economic system with Chapter 17. So, economic freedoms are something that you need to be aware of what different kinds of economic freedoms you have. And there are 5 different economic freedoms. The first is the freedom to buy and sell. That here in the U.S. we have what's called a free market system. And that just means that people are free to choose to buy stuff or to sell stuff. That there's no government regulation telling you that you can't do things or that you can do things. So that's one of the first freedoms. The second freedom is the freedom to compete. And again, the U.S. system has something called free competition, which is where business owners compete for customers, and they can do that with sales, or they can do that with deals and offers, and sometimes they give like rebates and that kind of stuff. So that's how they're competing for customers to come in and buy their stuff, by offering coupons and all kinds of things. So again, there's not much for government regulation in that. You can choose to do that. The third is a freedom to earn a living. And so you have the ability to seek a job. You have the ability to leave your job if you are unhappy with it, to get further education and all kinds of stuff that you can do. So you have the freedom to earn a living. You aren't told what job you are required to go into. The fourth is the freedom to earn a profit. And that just means making money. You have the freedom to earn money, to earn a profit. So there's something called profit motive that kind of works with this, and profit motive is the desire to make a profit, that there's some sort of incentive that you get from making money. So like profit motive for you guys would be that you have your own spending money, that you're able to, save up for a car or save up for a new phone or whatever it is that is motivating you to make money. And so people who have a lot of profit motive, typically they like to invest, and that means they put their money into something in the hopes that it's going to be very profitable at the end. So things like the stock market is a way for you to invest, and hopefully you come out with a profit at the end of it. The fifth freedom is the freedom to own property, and you have the right to own and to use land, to use your belongings. And it's not just land and property, it can be like money, it can be ideas. So you have the right to own your own ideas. And they do that through things like copyrights and patents. Well, a copyright is the exclusive right to publish or sell a written, musical, or artwork for a certain number of years. A patent is the exclusive right to make or sell an invention or an improvement on an invention for a certain number of years. So that's a way that you would have ownership of that property. So, like I said, we have a free market system, which means that's where people are able to freely choose to buy and sell. And when you have resources in a free market system, the basis of that free market system is that people's wants and needs, the things that they want and the things that they need, are greater than our nation's resources. And so when you have limited resources, that leads to scarcity. And scarcity has a lot to do with supply and demand. People demand goods and services. People want things. People need things. And businesses supply them. So the balance between this supply and demand is going to determine the price of things. So, for example, the law of supply. If a business supplies more goods, then the prices are going to drop, right? Because there's more things out there, you have variety of choices, so you're going to have lower prices. So the law of supply says that businesses are going to supply more goods at higher prices and less goods at lower prices. So if there's not a lot of choice at the lower end, but there's a lot of choice at the upper end, people are going to probably buy more from the upper end prices. Now the law of demand says that buyers want more goods at lower prices and less goods at higher prices. So buyers want more of the lower prices, but sellers want to sell at the high prices. So you got to get a balance between these of supply and demand. All depends on your resources. If you have a scarcity of resources, you're going to have less goods, which means what's going to happen to prices probably going to go up. So our system, like I said, is a free market system, but it's also called a capitalist system. And capitalism is an economic system that is based on the money that people invest in a business, that profit motive. And investment can be not only money, but it could be like tools, or you invest a building or machines. And this encourages people to work and to invest in that product in order to improve their lives. If you work harder at something, you're probably going to get a raise, kind of idea, that profit motive, that incentive to get you to work harder. And with our capitalist system and our free market system, we also have something called free enterprise. So it's kind of a lot of the same idea, but tweaked a little bit. So capitalist is very similar to free market, which is also very similar to free enterprise. And free enterprise is where people are free to operate their businesses as they see fit. So if you want to take a risk and invest in a supercomputer, or invest in new technology that'll, like a machine that is going to make your work faster or make your product come out faster, you can do that. But it's a risk, because what if the machine breaks down, or you have to get rid of some employees in order to cover the cost? So again, it's a risk kind of thing. So with that as our background of how our business world works, of how our economic system works here in the US, we can see the rise of big business. And big business benefited from the development of new technology. People invested in new technology, which allowed them to produce more goods at a quicker rate, at cheaper costs, which means that they're going to make more profit. And so they're able to produce larger quantities of goods, which means that they get lots of money. That profit motive is working in there. Well, eventually what we see happening with these big businesses coming about is that many of them want to become, or start looking like, monopolies. And a monopoly is a company that is the only one selling a product or a service, which means there's no competition, which means somebody isn't selling it for less, which makes you force your prices down. And so when you have a monopoly, the monopoly controls the prices, which means they can set it at whatever they want. And when you have competition, they can't do that. So you really want to have competition. You don't want to have monopolies. But what we see in these big businesses is that there's a tendency towards monopolies. Things that can lead to monopolies include mergers. And a merger is when two or more companies combine in order to form one company. And so if these two companies were competitors and now they combine together, they no longer have as much competition. So that can lead to a monopoly. Another thing that can lead to a monopoly is a trust. And a trust is where, again, you have several different companies, but they don't combine together. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to create a board of trustees that watches over all of them. And so this board of trustees, like if you have 10 companies and each company sends 2 people to the board of trustees, so now you have these 20 people that are watching out and controlling what's happening in these companies. It reduces the competition. So even though they're not combining together, they're still under the control of one combined group. And that's going to cut or reduce your competition, which means they're going to be able to set prices at whatever they want, because now they no longer have to compete with those other companies. So that's a very dangerous thing, and our government tends to watch out for those things. Now, our government doesn't want to completely eliminate big business, even though they have these tendencies to become monopolies. We don't want to get rid of big business. It's essential to our economy because they can produce goods and services more efficiently than smaller companies can. And so if we just got rid of big business and just had smaller companies, prices would still go up because smaller companies can't afford the technology, or they can't afford the mass quantities of resources that bigger companies can get. And so their prices are going to go up regardless. So we kind of need to have those big companies. So how do we regulate them and make sure that they aren't really setting prices that are astronomically huge that nobody could afford? Well, the federal government's job is to regulate them and to make sure that they are behaving themselves, basically. And so the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 is going to prevent monopolies from occurring. Now there's some monopolies that it's okay. We're going to talk about them in just a little bit. And the Clayton Act of 1914, Clayton Act of 1914 is going to forbid practices that weaken competition, like trusts. So we're going to see the government really get involved and get more involved than normal in business practices in the bigger businesses. And so with that, we've seen an increase in the number of conglomerates rather than mergers or trusts. And a conglomerate is a merger of businesses that produce or sell or supply unrelated goods and services. So it would be like if Walmart joined up with Verizon. They don't provide the same services at all. And so if they combine together, they're not reducing competition. They're just creating more resources for themselves. So that would be an example of a conglomerate. But conglomerates are still watched very carefully. They're not allowed to take too much control of the market. Now, like I said, there are certain monopolies that are legal to have. You can still have them. And those would be things like your public utilities. And these are companies that provide essential services like electricity or natural gas. It's not like you can get different brands of electricity or different brands of natural gas like you can for cars or shoes or jeans or things like that. So it's legal to have a monopoly if there's only one kind of the thing. Like there's only one kind of electricity, there's only one kind of natural gas. So when we compare economic systems, looking at other kinds of countries' economic systems, some countries have something called a command economy, and that's kind of the opposite of what we have. A command economy is where the government owns all of the money, all the tools, all the equipment, and they decide what the companies are going to produce and how much they're going to produce and how much they're going to charge. So they are in charge of all of those decisions. So the government makes those decisions as opposed to business people making those decisions. Another kind of economy which is used in the world is called a mixed economy, and it has features of both a command and free economy. So for some industries, maybe the government controls it. So like the natural resources like coal or oil, natural gas, the government controls those, but the rest are left to individuals. So it kind of depends on the country and how it works. So moving on to the next thing, we're going to look at how our businesses are actually organized. So now that we know how they operate, now we're going to look how they're organized. There are several different kinds of business organizations. The first is a sole proprietorship, and a sole proprietorship is one that is owned solely by one person. So one person owns it. Now the advantage of this is that if you own the business, you're your own boss. You set your own hours, you get all the profits, so that's good. But the disadvantage of this is that in order to start up your business, you had to provide all the startup money. You supply all the money, and if it fails, it's all on you. You're the sole person responsible for it, so you owe all the debt as well. The second kind of organization is a partnership, and a partnership is owned by two or more people. And the advantage of this is that you share the work, you share the responsibility, you share the startup money. But the disadvantage is that you also share the profits. So it's kind of a give and take on those two. The third type of organization is a corporation, and a corporation is a business organization for larger businesses like Walmart or Verizon, those larger businesses, Google, all that kind of stuff. And it's got some important features. Number one is raising money. How do they get the money? Well, most of them sell stocks, and stocks are shares of ownership. So if you buy a stock in Google or in Facebook, you're buying a sliver of a portion of the ownership of it. And from that you get dividends, and dividends is the profit that is paid out. So if you bought into Facebook and you bought into it at $10 a share, and 3 years later it's $15 a share, and you sell your share, you made $5. So that's how that works. That's a dividend. That's what you get back, your profit. Letter B is the rights to operate, and corporations are given rights to operate by the states. The states kind of set up, regulations that they want to see happen within these corporations, like where can they be located and what kind of business can they have, and work regulations, all kinds of stuff. And they also receive protection from this as well, like they get certain tax credits and that kind of thing. Letter C is that most corporations will elect a director, and usually they're elected by the stockholders, but not always. But usually they're directed by somebody who has a good business background. Letter D is choosing executives like the president of the company, vice president, secretaries, and treasurer. So you usually want to have people that have that good business background in charge. And letter E is debt responsibility. And this is where the stockholders are. So if you buy stock in the company, you're responsible only for the amount of stock that you bought. You're not responsible for everybody else. So like I said, if you bought into Facebook and you bought $10 worth of shares, you're only out the $10 if the company goes under. You're not out the million whatever. So it's only that. The fourth kind of company is a nonprofit organization, and these can vary in size. And nonprofits basically provide goods and services without seeking to earn a profit. And so a lot of these are like your research organizations for different diseases like cancer or lymphoma, those kinds of things. Or museums are typically nonprofit, and so like if you go and buy a souvenir, they don't charge you taxes on it. It's all tax-free. And they can do that because they're a nonprofit. They're not seeking a profit off of it. So these companies, when they come into being, they have to make business decisions. And basically those business decisions come from their four factors. The four factors of production, of how you make a product. The first is land. Basically, every company has to take into consideration where it's going to be located and what kind of natural resources it needs, what kind of resources it needs to come into it to make its product. So are they going to rent? Are they going to buy their property? The second is capital, and capital is money or equipment or tools that are needed in order to make your business work effectively. The third is labor, and labor is any human effort that is used to produce goods and services. So it's your workers. And so you really want to look at your productivity of your workers. Like the amount of work that can be produced by one worker in an hour is your productivity, and you want it to be a very high productivity. You want them to produce multiple things in a set amount of time. The fourth is management, and these are the people that are making the business decisions of how much needs to be made, what are we going to charge for it, how much time are people going to work, all those kinds of decisions. And then from this you get profits, and there's two different kinds of profits every business gets. You get a gross income and a net income. Gross income is the total amount of money that a company receives from the sales of its goods and services. So it's everything that comes in that day. Your net income is the amount that's left over after all of your costs have been paid. So like your wages for your workers, your taxes, your rent for the building or machines or whatever. So your net is what you are actually making. Your gross is what you're making on paper, but your net is what you're actually taking home. So the government's role in all of this and how the businesses work. The first is that they serve as a referee, and they try to protect those small businesses. The second is that they're an overseer. So they try to protect the workers, they try to protect the environment, and they're trying to protect the consumers, the people who are buying these products. And the third is they serve as an informant, which means that when you're planning a business, they help you by, helping you to know where to go. So the government tries to give you ideas of, what is it going to cost? What kind of sales should you do? And so there's always some sort of government help for you. So that is our government or our economic system kind of lumped up. And we're going to learn more about some of the various different parts of this in future chapters.